Welcome to World History. Today we're going to talk about the Roman Republic and then the Roman Empire. So, Rome started out as a city-state, somewhat similar to the Greek city-states we talked about previously. It's on the Italian peninsula, about halfway up here, and like the Greek city-states, it had a republican form of government, which meant that there was some measure of democracy where citizens could have some input into the government's actions. The most important group in the Roman Republic was the Senate, composed of wealthy leading citizens who could make laws. They would then choose from their ranks all of these different positions, who all had specific roles within the system of government. Most important were the consuls. There were two consuls who were chosen every year, and this meant that they had power to control the government, control the army, and because there were two of them, they could each check the powers of the other. This would prevent any one person from becoming too powerful within the Roman system. So the Roman Republic functioned well for quite some time, but because of their military success, eventually they started to face problems, especially after the Punic Wars, which were wars against a city-state called Carthage here on the coast of northern Africa. The Roman Republic grew significantly, and the role of and generals became increasingly powerful. Generals like Gaius Marius and Lucius Sulla here started to gain more power because their troops were loyal to them and now no longer loyal to the Senate and the people of Rome. So eventually, sometimes these generals would take over, and then they'd post lists of their political enemies who would then be killed on sight, and then they would rule as a dictator until they died, and then the power would fall back to the Senate. So this happened a number of times in the later years of the Roman Republic, until finally the Republic collapsed under its weight, and was replaced by the Roman Empire. Rome transitioned from a republic to an empire with the rise of a man named Julius Caesar. Caesar had won great victories up in what is today France, and this gave him significant power and the loyalty of his troops. And so the Senate, fearing his power, tried to move against him. And so Caesar marched into Rome itself with an army, crossing the Rubicon River and famously bringing troops into Rome, where no troops were supposed to be. He then declared himself dictator for life, which outraged the Roman Senate because, of course, dictator for life is a long time, and they did not want to. Have their powers lessened, and so a group of senators plotted to assassinate Julius Caesar. He was stabbed to death by a group of senators, and this was an attempt to bring back the Roman Republic. But unfortunately for the senators, this plan backfired, and Julius Caesar's adopted son Octavian then killed the conspirators and styled himself the emperor. All the previous parts of the republic still existed. There was still consuls, there was still a senate, there were still tribunes, all this stuff, but they didn't have any power anymore, and all of the authority, or most of the authority, now rested with the emperor. So, Roman Republic transitions to Roman Empire. The Romans were known for a variety of different things. Most famous was the Roman infrastructure. The Romans were incredible planners and builders. They built massive aqueducts that are still functional today. They had huge bathhouses that provided public services for the citizens. But probably most famous were the Roman roads. The Romans wanted roads to both facilitate the movement of their armies as well as allowing trade. And so they built these roads with several different layers of surfaces in order to make them last, with drainage ditches at the side so the water would sort of roll off of it. And these roads allowed for people and supplies to move throughout the entire Roman Empire, as you can see in this map here. The other thing that the Romans were known for was their version of citizenship. You can pause the video here to look at some of the privileges and protections of Roman citizens, but the important takeaway is, unlike Greek citizenship, where you had to be born into it, Roman citizenship could be acquired from people from the provinces. This meant that the Romans could use their vision of citizenship, or This meant that the Romans could grant citizenship to people from the provinces, and then they would have a stake in the Roman government. In fact, people from the provinces could move all the way up the cursus honorum and even become emperor, with some of the most famous Roman emperors in the late empire not coming from Rome at all, but coming from places like Africa or Spain. The Roman Empire lasted for as long as it did, somewhere between 1 to 2,000 years, depending on when you count the end of the empire, because it was successful at bringing order and stability to the Mediterranean. This was partially because of the effectiveness of the Roman legions, who were incredibly versatile and well equipped, and therefore able to defeat much larger enemy forces. Partially, this was because of Roman laws, which were written down and applied to everyone, making sure that everyone in the empire had a fair shot. This was partially because of some good leadership, as a number of emperors helped to organize society and make it operate more smoothly. Famously, emperors like Trajan and Diocletian. And partially because it brought prosperity to people through trade. And in general, it turns out when people have money and are comfortable, they're willing to give up some rights and privileges in order to keep that level of comfort. So Roman order was a big component of why the empire lasted as long as it did. As you can see, the Roman Empire grew at its greatest extent to control the entire Mediterranean. They also had conquered Egypt, Mesopotamia, and all the way up to the Isle of Britain, where they controlled the southern half of the Isle of Great Britain. One of the largest challenges the Romans faced was the spread of Christianity. Christianity is an offset religion of Judaism, following the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, who was born in Israel, in Bethlehem, right around pretty close to the year zero, probably a few years before the year zero technically, but pretty close to the year zero. The Romans at first viewed Christianity kind of askance because, one, they didn't particularly like Judaism because the Jews had a number of revolts against the Roman Empire. And secondarily, they thought that there were some undertones of cannibalism in Christianity because, of course, the whole the idea of eating Jesus's body and drinking his blood through the communion ritual. But over time, Christianity survived several Roman purges and significant persecution by emperors and spread throughout the empire, until finally an emperor named Constantine converted to Christianity after purportedly seeing a vision of a cross in the sky before a battle. Constantine then went out and won the battle and converted to Christianity as a reaction to that. And so the bishop, throughout Rome, and so Christianity became the official religion of the empire, and the Bishop of Rome became the head of the Christian church, who eventually became known as the Pope. Eventually, the Roman Empire became too large and unwieldy to be governed by one man. There were a series of very unpleasant civil wars in which generals seized parts of the empire and tried to unite it. And so after these incredibly bloody civil wars, an emperor named Diocletian rose to power, and he formally divided the empire into two halves: a Western empire that would be ruled from Rome, and an Eastern empire that would be ruled from Byzantium. Eventually, the city of Byzantium was named Constantinople, but although it was one empire ruled by two emperors, these two cultures started to develop differently and started to develop their own sort of culture and customs and flavor, if you will. Eventually, the Roman Empire in the West began to decline. And you can pause the video here and take a look at all the contributing factors, but a lot of it was corruption and then also pressure from invading nomadic tribes. And so these nomadic tribes began to attack the edges of the Western Empire, and it became too expensive to fight them off. And so what you eventually got is the Western Empire started to collapse under its weight. The Western Roman Empire finally fell in 476 AD. Rome had been sacked repeatedly by a variety of different barbarian tribes, and the city was finally abandoned after this last sacking, which is depicted here very dramatically in a Renaissance era artwork. Despite the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire continued Roman traditions for approximately another 1,000 years. And so Rome itself, or the idea of Rome, continued to survive, even though the city itself was an abandoned, burned out hulk that was resettled generations later. So the Roman Empire fell in 476, but it also survived another 1,000 years until the city of Constantinople was finally conquered by the Ottoman Turks. But that's a story for a couple units from now.